Hello, once again, to all of my subscribers to Fool's Gold Confessions from an Educated Fool. This is Donald Earl Collins coming to you again. To all of my subscribers, the ones who are paying, the ones who are here for free, um, grateful that y'all are still sticking around to read my writings, to hear my ramblings, to hear my rants actually at times, to listen, hopefully learn, and hopefully empathize, right? I don't, what I'm about to talk to might make some of y'all feel sorry for me. Please don't. The truth of the matter is, yes, I remember stuff from my childhood that's kind of traumatic, right? Certain things that most people still in 2026 really don't want to talk about or discuss. Um, and I've been to therapy and I've dealt and I'm dealing and I constantly deal with these kinds of issues anyway. So it's you know, it is what it is. I mean, I can't change what happened to me in terms of my life, especially in the years prior to going off to college. There's only so much I could have done about really anything that happened to me. So, but don't feel sorry for me. You should, if anything, feel emboldened to when people tell you their truth, whether they're 6 years old or 56, or if somehow they make it to 106 years old, believe them. There's no reason not to believe people after all, unless they have proven themselves through words and deeds, not only to not be believable, but to be pieces of shit. Okay. And so, what I really want to concentrate on with this particular Substack, and it does relate to being an educated fool, it relates to the fool's gold aspects of things, of being able to use your imagination to have a better life, and or to at least believe yourself through action, through deed, through hard work, through your abilities to have create the world and create a life that is meaningful, that's worth living, that is better than what you grew up in, is potentially better for the people in your life who, when they grow up, in my case, my son, that he can have an even better life than the one that I've had, even in the midst of everything that's happening in this country, in the US, and around the world. So, but anyway, I talk about the fact that this time 50 years ago, I reported my sexual assault, the one that I experienced in the playground on the streets of Mount Vernon, New York, just a few doors down from where I lived at 6.5 years old. And I've spent a lot of time talking about my mom's reaction to this over the years. I really have. I've talked about this not only in the Medium piece, but in my old blog, Notes from a Boy at the Window blog, in other scenarios and other places. I've even interviewed somewhat on these kinds of issues, not specifically my own trauma, but other people's trauma, right? And and there are any number of reasons why people could be mad at my mom about her reaction, including yours truly. And I'm not really angry with her at this point in my life. I was for a long time when I was younger, when I was a kid, to be sure. And, there might be some residual anger per se, but it's not anger. It's mostly disappointment and the realization that the mom that I've had was never really wanted to be a parent, never really wanted to parent me, in part because of who my dad was, right? And so and I don't even want to go through all of that, but it did shape me to the person I am. I'm not going to argue that it didn't. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing either, to be shaped in terms of your scholarship, in terms of your intellectual abilities, in terms of, the kinds of things that I write about on the basis of all the trauma I suffered when I was a kid. That's not really good when you really think about it, but at the same time, it makes sense, right? But I ask in this particular subset, what about my dad? And it makes sense to ask about my dad for this reason, right? 50 years ago, my dad was a raging alcoholic, so misogynistic that literally the first words I remember him saying, I'm going to say them in the way that my dad would say them, which is, "You's a black bitch." That's exactly how he talks. It's the way he sounded in 1974. Heard it. That's more or less how he sounds now. He just talks a little bit more slowly like this. My name is the God and kind of thing, right? Well, his non-reaction is as much, is as problematic, if not more problematic, than the way my mom responded. Because My mom responded out of anger, out of a sense of being one upped, because this happened, upon me overhearing the conversation that she was filing for divorce from my dad. She had already written out the paperwork. She had already contacted a lawyer. She had done all the whole 9 yards. And it was time to break up. You're a mean and evil man. You want to control me. You've been trying to kill me with, knife me and all this other stuff. I'm tired of it, right? She's just tired. I mean, I remember her saying how tired she was of him, right? And it as a kid, it makes you upset to know your parents are breaking up. But I was already upset because of what I suffered, and so an ensuing argument that happens between me and my mom about this, where I blurt out basically that I was sexually assaulted. She responds by basically telling me that's what you get for leaving the house, as if that as if a 6-year-old is going to who's home by themselves is just going to be dutifully just sitting there by themselves in the house all the time, because that's child neglect. If that had been reported even in 1976, that my mom is repeatedly leaving me home to go work to a 3 and 11 shift, with the excuse that, well, Darren, my older brother, would be home. My older brother's only 2 years older than me. He's 8, right? 8-year-olds aren't expected to take care of 6-year-olds, right? That's pretty fucking terrible, right? In today's world, that wouldn't pass muster. A lot of parents would be in trouble for that one, right? But where is my dad? Truthfully, he should have been home during that time. It wasn't. He worked night shifts at Salesian High School in 1976 in New Rochelle, this private school where he cleaned floors and cleaned bathrooms as a custodian and so on and so forth. That's what he did as a job. That was a night shift job, which meant he should have been home. But he spent a lot of his days just going out to drink. The day that this happened, he was gone. So here's this 2 hour gap between when my mom goes to work and when Darren, my older brother, some presumably, will keep tabs on me as an 8-year-old, right? Which of course didn't happen because he's 8 and I'm 6, right? So anyway, bottom line is my mom's reaction, to say the least, as someone who's been a parent to it, for 23 plus years, is pretty fucking horrible. But my dad's complete. I'm not going to be home. I'm going to get my drink. I got to get my pip up. And, I'm going to go around and have myself a good time, be a big shot. And, tell these poor ass motherfuckers they don't know shit about shit kinds of things. That's what my dad was doing for probably 4 or 5 out of 7 days. Sometimes he wouldn't be home for a week because that's when he went carousing, crashing on people's couches, and then going to work and then not coming home, kind of stuff, and not paying bills that he should be paying, and all this kind of stuff. So the fact that my dad had no reaction, I mean, no reaction, didn't get mad, didn't cry, didn't go, I'm so sorry about all that has happened to you, or anything along those lines, didn't get mad like my mom did, no reaction. He was, you can say, well, maybe he's still reeling from the fact that your mom told him he's getting divorced. Maybe so, but I don't know which is worse, right? The fact that he didn't have much of a reaction to my mom filing for a divorce, and the fact that he didn't have much reaction to son saying that son has been sexually assaulted, right? In fact, for years, he didn't react at all. It wasn't until I turned 14 and shot up in height to 6 feet, 6'1", where he starts asking me, did I get my dick wet? Right? Go to him for money, go to him to take him out of a bar, go to him, go to work with him. Because my first job was actually working with my dad for off and on for a year. And he's like, did you get your dick wet? And I'm like, no, you a faggot. That's literally his response to every time I said no to this. The first time it really hurt. I mean, I almost cried when he called me this. Not because I was anti-gay or anything like that, but along the lines of, what do you expect me as a 14-year-old to be doing with my life when I'm just trying to like have sex with everybody that passes by? That sounds like more of a your, as in terms of today's factor, your problem, not so much mine. Which by the time I was 15, I kind of figured out that this is his problem because he didn't see himself as manly enough, and therefore, if you're not a man, you have to be gay. Well, the more derogatory term that he liked regularly using. So that was his only reaction long term to what happened to me when I was 6.5 years old, right? And I say all of that because, again, that shapes who I am, right? One of the reasons why I'm probably not, homophobic or transphobic, because I just feel like, why do you care about these things? Why do you care? Why do you care about whether somebody loves someone who's same sex or loves someone who is, you know, gender fluid, or, between genders, even intersex? Why do you fucking care about any of this shit, you stupid MF? Why do you care about any of it? He's never been able to answer that question, even when I've put it to him as recently as a couple of years ago. This is what I'm really getting at. Since July the 6th, yeah, July 6th, when my cousin found my dad passed out in front of his bathroom in the living room area of this claptrap house that he lives in the middle of nowhere's Fuckville, Harrison, Georgia. He has been to the hospital for 10 days, lingering, clinging to life with multiple issues, including multiple organ failure, especially his kidneys, potentially hypoxia, to a brain that was legitimately already damaged from years of alcohol and years of getting hit upside the head by people when he got into fights with people, including in 1981, where he actually died on the operating table when they tried to close up a bleed in his brain from getting hit with a Louisville slugger in Wynot Park in Mount Vernon in the summer of 1981, where he probably was dead for 2 or 3 minutes. So when you throw all that in, yeah, he probably has some serious fucking brain damage, right? To go with the senility, to go with the diabetes and hypertension and blood pressure and blood clots and necrosis in various body parts of his body, because he laid on the floor for probably several days in that state after blacking out from likely a stroke or a series of strokes. And here I am, over the last 4 or 5 weeks taking over his care. I said to my wife 4 years ago that I didn't want to be in this position where I had to make end of life decisions for my dad, right? Because of all the stuff that goes with things that happened 50 years ago, right? Things that proved that he wasn't, on his best day, he wasn't a very good dad. I mean, he did good things as a dad here and there. And I'm not saying he didn't do anything good, because I remember those good things. I remember him taking us to see the Mets play for the first time in 1984. I remember him taking us to the windows of the world in the World Trade Center in the summer of 1983, where we could look down and go, oh my God, look at the Atlantic Ocean and look at this. We're 1,000+ feet up in the air, this huge building, and seeing all these sights, and among other things, right? Those are good things. But if you rest your laurels on a handful of things that your dad did, while, taking out his manosphere insecurities on you pretty much your whole fucking life, yeah, you're not going to feel very good about being in this situation. That doesn't mean I don't love my dad on some level. I do. I'm not going to argue I don't love my dad. I don't want him dying in a ditch in the middle of Nowheresville, Georgia, after all. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, this is great. I have to be responsible for a person who's probably going to be dead within the next year because of the assortment of things that are going on with him. And while he seems completely chastened at this point in his life, he admits that he's going to die pretty soon. He knows he's going to die pretty soon. That's what he told me yesterday. He knows that he can't take care of himself anymore. He knows all that. But at the same time, I'm going, but you spent years basically beating me upside the head telling me that because I don't believe in Jesus exactly the way you do, that I'm going to hell. You've literally said these things to me as recently as 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Last year. As recently as last year, he wrote me a letter telling me sin sick will kill you. Sin sick will kill you. Kinds of stuff, right? So, you know, I, you know, so for me, as someone who is in the middle of trying to get the last portion of their career, the next 10 or 20 years of working, because I've been working since 1984, the last third of this, and which should take me into my early 70s, to find work that's meaningful, find work that helps change people's lives, find work that basically convinces people that the world in which we live in shouldn't be the world that we're always supposed to live in. That it is what it is. Not only is bullshit, it's completely and utterly fucking unacceptable. That we create the better world that we want now. We imagine the better world that we want beyond what we're creating now. Right? So we do the imagination and the creation simultaneously. That means breaking down systems. That means protesting systems and symptoms of systems. That requires us not to try to change the hearts and minds of people who don't want their minds changed. There are 120 million Americans minimally who, no matter what you say to them, mostly white, but black men, throw cis hetero black men in there, throw in folks who are foot soldiers for the patriarchy and foot soldiers for systemic racism in there. Throw all those fuckers in there. They're not going to change no matter what you do. I don't care how many books Ibram Kendi puts out. I don't care how many workshops Robin DiAngelo does. I don't care um, how many other people try to go hearts and minds and all that other stuff. Screw that. We need to rely on the people who want the world that we need to have for humanity's future, for our own futures. We need those people now, not to be working on hearts and minds of individuals so you can get money from, Jack Dorsey, formerly of Twitter, or whomever else you're trying to get money from. So it relates to that, right? And part of being of that better world really is the reality that when you're dealing with somebody who's been a piece of shit for, out of the 86 years he's lived, probably 76, 71 to 76 of those years, because as an adult, he's been pretty terrible. As a dad, he's god awful. As a husband, he's been through 2 divorces. He's just he's a misogynist to his core, right? That kind of thing. So there's that. And, you know, as someone who's been responsible in some adult sort of way since the age of 12 and has taken, matters in his own hands as a kid as early as that, and obviously with regard to the things I'm talking about from 50 years ago, maybe even earlier than that, yeah, I don't relish this prospect of, dealing with his finances and dealing with his health care. But I've already been doing it for the better part of the past month or so already. So, well, it is what it is in this particular case, but it is what it is with the reality that, simply put, I don't want on my conscience the idea that when I could have stepped up and helped him in his in stages of life, I said no. The next thing you know, that he's out there mumbling and stumbling, getting hit by a car going 80 miles an hour down some country road in the middle of nowheresville. And so I don't need that on my conscience. But also, I just feel like that because, you know, this is the kind of thing that you should do for anybody. We should have a society that takes care of our elderly, regardless of how much of a piece of shit that person was in life, right? Regardless of whether I have the financial means to help my dad out or not. I don't have the financial means at this point, to be perfectly honest, but I do have other skill sets that will help, including managing the money that he does get. So, for that purpose. So, there's that. And as an educated fool, and I use this term euphemistically, I don't literally see myself as an educated fool. I have done foolish things with my education, so to speak, in the sense that I've not always made the greatest decision about a particular job or about a particular career move or whatnot. But given the fact that my examples include a man who's now in the nursing home, who can barely string 3 sentences together, but still pretty lucid, with barely a seventh grade education, your reading ability of what I had when I started third grade, maybe by the middle part of third grade at best. Yeah, I've done pretty well despite, not because of my parenting. So there's that. Um, that's pretty much all I have to say. I might say more about what's going on with regard to my dad and how that relates to me, both professionally, personally, somewhere down the line. But I'm going to leave it there because there's certain things I can't talk about yet because they're still in process, and certain things around dealing with family that shows that, maybe my wife isn't right about me being adopted. I'm pretty sure I'm not. My genetics say that I'm not, but it sure fucking feels like it. So anyway, talk to you again soon, folks. Take care.